A girl entered the Ottoman world through slavery, passed behind palace screens, and became one of the most powerful rulers the empire ever had. That is not a legend built from one dramatic rumor. It is the broad shape of the life of Kösem Sultan. Many viewers first think of Harem when they hear about a powerful Ottoman woman, and Harem was indeed remarkable under Suleiman the Magnificent. But Kosem fits the phrase secretly ruled the empire more closely, because she did not only influence a sultan, she held regency power across multiple reigns. Her story matters because it overturns the simple picture of Ottoman politics as a world run only by sultans and grand viziers. Behind the throne stood mothers, eunuchs, soldiers, marriage alliances, and palace networks that could decide who rose, who fell, and who survived. By the end of this script, you will know who Kosem was, how a slave girl became Valide Sultan, how her hidden power worked, and why her end was so violent. Kosem was born around 1589 and was probably of Greek origin, though not every detail of her early life is certain. Traditional accounts often call her Anastasia, but like many lives shaped by slavery and palace entry, the early record is not perfectly clean. As a teenager, she was taken into the Ottoman slave system and brought into the imperial harem. That sentence sounds simple, but the harem was not just a romantic background full of luxury and gossip. It was a political institution, a training environment, and one of the most important power centers in the empire. Girls brought there could be educated, ranked, watched, and positioned inside a dynastic machine larger than any single relationship. Kosem rose inside that machine with unusual skill. Sources repeatedly point not only to beauty but to intelligence, political instinct, and an ability to form durable alliances. Those abilities mattered because palace life could destroy powerful people overnight. One wrong faction, one succession change, one shift in military mood, and yesterday's favorite could become tomorrow's victim. Kosem became the favored consort of Sultan Ahmed I and rose to the rank of Haseki, the chief consort. She bore several children, including future sultans Murad IV and Ibrahim. In the Ottoman dynastic system, motherhood was political power. Producing male heirs did not guarantee safety, but it gave a woman leverage that could reshape the whole future of the throne. That leverage grew even stronger in the period historians often call the Sultanate of Women. This was a time when elite women of the imperial household held unusually high influence in state affairs. That did not mean they ruled openly like kings standing on balconies to address crowds. Their power moved through kinship, access, patronage, correspondence, appointments, and control of palace channels. That is what secret rule meant in the Ottoman setting. It did not mean no one knew Kosem had power. It meant the architecture of sovereignty forced that power to work through veils and protocol. The real breakthrough came when her son Murad IV took the throne in 1623 as a child. A child sultan creates a vacuum, and vacuums in imperial politics do not stay empty for long. Kosem became Valide Sultan, the mother of the reigning sultan, one of the most powerful positions available in the empire. As Valide to a minor ruler, she effectively governed as regent. This was not symbolic motherhood. This was active state power. She influenced appointments and dismissals, worked through palace channels, and balanced dangerous factions in a period full of instability. The Janissaries and other military forces mattered deeply, and no regent could ignore them. Kosem had to understand which groups could be used, which had to be managed, and which might turn on the dynasty itself. That is one reason her power looks so modern when you study it closely. She was not waving a scepter in public. She was managing networks, personalities, and crises inside a highly constrained system. She also used dynastic marriage alliances involving princesses to tie important statesmen closer to the ruling family. Marriage in that world was not a side detail. It was a political tool that could bind loyalty to the palace. Murad IV eventually became a powerful ruler in his own right, but Kosem's importance did not vanish after his childhood ended. She remained central during the reign of Ibrahim as well, though that relationship included tension and attempts to reduce her influence. Even then, removing someone like Kosem was never easy because her authority did not rest on one single office or one single mood. It rested on accumulated relationships, dynastic status, experience, and the fact that the palace itself had learned to work through her. Her story also shows how gender and visibility interact in imperial systems. A male ruler could appear as sovereign power in public language and ritual. A woman like Kosem could exercise enormous influence while hostile observers still described her as merely manipulative or overmighty. Some of that criticism reflects real palace violence. Some of it reflects suspicion toward female authority itself. Court history often mixes fact with moral theater, especially when writers want to punish strong women in the story after the fact. So when later chroniclers describe her as dangerously ambitious, we should read carefully rather than swallow every accusation whole. She was almost certainly capable of ruthless intervention, because Ottoman succession politics could be ruthless to the core. But calling her ruthless does not prove she was illegitimate. It may only prove she played by the brutal rules of the court she lived in. Her power was not only political in the narrow palace sense. Like other elite Ottoman women, Kosem used charitable endowments and public works to build legitimacy. She funded religious and charitable foundations, including support for pilgrims and infrastructure tied to piety and public benefit. That kind of patronage did several things at once. It expressed devotion, distributed wealth, created public memory, and turned private influence into something visible and socially anchored. In empires, charity can be both sincere and political, and in Kosem's case, it was part of how authority was stabilized. Then came the final and most dangerous phase of her life. After Murad IV died, Ibrahim's unstable reign collapsed, and the child Mehmed IV came to the throne. A child ruler created the conditions for another regency struggle, and this time Kosem was not the only woman with a claim. Turhan Sultan, Mehmed's mother, became her major rival. Now the palace contained two powerful maternal centers, and the empire could not safely carry both forever. This was not a private family disagreement. It was a factional war over who would control access, appointments, and the machinery of rule. In 1651, Kösem Sultan was killed inside Topkapi Palace. Her death was almost certainly the climax of this regency struggle and one of the most dramatic assassinations in Ottoman court history. The woman who had survived dynastic shifts, managed sultans, and governed from behind the screens was finally destroyed by the same palace logic she had mastered. That ending is tragic, but it also reveals the full scale of her importance. People do not murder a figure like Kosem because she is decorative. They murder her because power around her has become too great to ignore. That is why the phrase secretly ruled can be misleading if we imagine hidden power as small or uncertain. Her power was real, public inside the court, and deeply consequential for the empire. It was secret only in the sense that Ottoman political form made direct female kingship impossible, so influence had to move through accepted channels. Those channels were mother-son authority, regency, palace networks, eunuch mediation, patronage, and strategic alliance. Once you understand that, Kosem stops looking like an exception and starts looking like a master of the system as it actually worked. She reveals a deeper truth about the Ottoman state. The empire was not simply a pyramid with one man at the top and everyone else below. It was a living network where household politics, military pressure, succession crises, and maternal authority could shape imperial survival. Kosem's rise from enslavement to near-sovereign influence also gives the story its lasting emotional force. A woman taken into the palace as property became one of the central decision-makers in one of the largest empires on earth. That reversal is dramatic enough to survive in popular memory, even when the details get blurred. But the real version is better than the simplified legend. She did not rule because everyone around her was blind. She ruled because she understood the palace better than almost anyone else inside it. She read people, managed crises, built alliances, and converted dynastic motherhood into state power on a scale few could match. And when the balance finally turned against her, it took another major faction, another maternal center, and palace violence to bring her down. So if someone calls her just a slave girl who got lucky, they missed the point completely. Luck may have opened one door, but intelligence, discipline, and political instinct kept that door open across multiple reigns. Kösem Sultan matters because she shows how hidden authority can be stronger than ceremonial visibility, especially in systems built on family and access. If you want the next story about power that moved behind official titles, watch the next episode because some of history's biggest rulers never wore the crown in the obvious way. The phrase Sultanate of Women sometimes misleads people into imagining a neat feminist revolution inside the empire. The reality was more specific and more dangerous. These women gained power because dynastic motherhood, palace access, and succession crises gave them leverage in moments when the state needed management. Kosem mastered that leverage better than almost anyone. Her authority rested on timing as much as position. When a boy sat on the throne, she could speak as the protector of the dynasty itself. That made resistance to her politically risky, because attacking the regent could look like attacking imperial stability. She also had something many rivals lacked: continuity across reigns. Most political players rise under one ruler and fall with him. Kosem remained important through the reigns of Ahmed I, Murad IV, Ibrahim, and even into the reign of her grandson Mehmed IV. That kind of survival suggests more than luck. It suggests memory, relationships, and a talent for reading where power was really moving. The imperial harem itself should be seen as a government space as much as a domestic one. Messages moved through it. Alliances were built there. Careers could rise or collapse depending on access within it. Because public visibility for elite Ottoman women was tightly constrained, outsiders often underestimated how much decision-making happened inside those walls. Kosem's career exposes that blind spot. She proves that a hidden channel can still carry the main current of power. Her charitable foundations matter for another reason too. Endowments created a public record of legitimacy beyond gossip and factional rumor. A woman accused by enemies of manipulation could still anchor herself in visible works of piety and service. That helped convert palace influence into moral authority outside the palace. It also linked her name to the welfare of pilgrims and religious life, which broadened the base of her reputation. Another reason her story survives is that it sits at the crossing point of three powerful themes. It is a rise from enslavement, a lesson in court politics, and a study in how motherhood can become statecraft. Each of those themes is strong on its own. Combined, they make her unforgettable. Her rivalry with Turhan Sultan shows how unstable regency politics could become. Once another mother stood close to the child sultan, the empire had two competing claims to dynastic guardianship. No bureaucratic rulebook could peacefully absorb that tension forever. Sooner or later, one center of maternal power had to defeat the other. Kosem lost that final struggle, but losing it does not erase what came before. In many ways, the violence of her end confirms the scale of her reach. A merely influential courtwoman might be ignored, married off, or quietly sidelined. Kosem had to be removed through lethal palace action because her position touched the heart of sovereignty itself. That is why her life still matters beyond Ottoman history. She shows that power often hides inside institutions that outsiders misread as private, decorative, or secondary. And she reminds us that some of the strongest rulers in history governed not by open kingship, but by mastery of the rooms behind the throne. Murad IV's minority shows especially well how her power worked. A child sultan could not personally dominate soldiers, judges, ministers, and faction leaders from day one. Someone had to stabilize the throne until the ruler could do more for himself. Kosem filled that gap, and in filling it, she shaped the empire's direction. Her work with appointments mattered because personnel choices in such a court were never neutral. Choosing one official over another could strengthen one military faction, weaken a rival household, or calm a volatile moment. That is statecraft, even if it happens through screens instead of public ceremony. Her later tension with Ibrahim also reminds us that proximity to power never guarantees simple family harmony. A son on the throne can still fear the mother whose experience and network overshadow his own authority. That kind of tension is common in courts where legitimacy and control are always being renegotiated. Kosem survived those tensions longer than most would have, and that endurance is part of her genius. There is also a larger lesson in how historians should read palace women. If the sources were mostly written by male officials or chroniclers, then female power often appears only when it becomes impossible to ignore. That means the written record can understate everyday influence and overstate scandal. Kosem's life sits exactly in that problem. We see her clearly in crises, appointments, and rivalries, but the full daily texture of her influence was probably even wider than the record admits. That makes careful reading essential. We should not romanticize her, yet we should not shrink her to a stereotype either. She was neither a fairy tale queen nor merely a scheming favorite. She was a political actor shaped by a violent system and unusually skilled at using the tools available inside it. Her life also changes how we think about slavery in imperial contexts. Enslavement in the Ottoman palace was still enslavement, yet the palace could also transform some captives into educated insiders within the dynastic order. That does not make the system humane, it makes the system complex. Kosem's rise came through that complexity, and her later authority cannot be understood without it. In the end, her story is not just about one woman climbing high. It is about how empires distribute real power through channels outsiders often miss, especially when gender, kinship, and ritual hide the machinery in plain sight. Seen this way, Kosem was not ruling in spite of the Ottoman system. She was ruling through a deep understanding of the Ottoman system. That distinction explains both her success and the fear she inspired. People feared her because she knew how sovereignty actually moved when a child sat on the throne and factions crowded the court. That kind of knowledge is rare, and in imperial politics, rare knowledge becomes real power. Her story also widens our idea of what a ruler looks like. A ruler may appear in armor, law codes, and public audiences. But a ruler can also appear in influence over succession, appointments, alliances, and the survival of the dynasty itself. Kosem operated in that second mode with extraordinary effect. That is why calling her hidden is accurate only if hidden means structurally veiled, not politically minor.